Yeah, everybody seems to have views on what they think is going to happen on Saturday night. Only two people know, of course, and that's the main fighters themselves, Carl Froch and George Groves. I'm joined by the fight promoter, Eddie Hearn. Eddie, obviously, you know Carl very, very well. The two of you work very closely together. Give us an insight into what Carl is feeling at the moment. How is his psyche, considering this war of words that's been going on between the pair of them so far?
I think Carl Froch is making a conscious effort not to be wound up right now. I know how he feels, I know what he wants to do, and he wants to go to town on George Groves on Saturday night. That's what he wants to do. He talked about previous incidents with Andre Durrell when he got very wound up in the pre-fight preparation, and he said that affected him on fight night. He made mistakes, he was sloppy in his work, and I think he's making a conscious effort to make sure that doesn't happen again. I wouldn't say he was rattled, he's motivated, potentially more so than I've ever seen him before. But then you've got George Groves, who's constantly in the air, and he's pushing. And you know, the fight week always throws up so many beautiful things, and obviously the big press conference tomorrow, George Groves has publicly said he's going to tell everybody, including Carl Froch, just how he's going to beat him on Saturday night. So a plethora of mind games going on right now, and it's fascinating as we build up to one of the biggest fights in a long time.
We can't wait for that press conference, and of course we'll be bringing you that live on Sky Sports News. We were talking to George last night, and the Behind the Rope show was on with Carl Froch, and Carl was reiterating his dislike for George and saying that he'd been rude and he was arrogant and what have you. He's clearly been abrasive, that's part of his plan, but is George actually like that? But he comes across to me as a real nice kid. He's
a lovely bloke, he's very clever. You know, I think he's got a plan. I think he wants to try and rattle Carl, and some would say it's working. You know, I think that Carl is probably more motivated than I've ever seen him for a fight. But at the same time, I'm not sure I've seen, you know, what some are calling a young pretender or an outsider with, you know, so much on his plate like George Groves, so cool and calm under pressure. He's very convincing. You know, you saw him at the workout yesterday in his interviews. You know, he's selling this fight well himself. And he's turning a lot of people into believers. You know, the odds are shortening. Even the experts are saying this fight's too close to call. On paper, Carl Froch should win this fight, but there's all kinds of questions that are being thrown into the air. Is it one fight too many for Carl Froch? Is it too early for George Groves? Can he stand the punch resistance and the intensity of Carl Froch? But that's what makes the fight so fascinating. We just don't know. And only a few days now before we find out.
Of course, there's a massive undercard going on as well. You've had to do a fair bit of juggling over the last couple of days, but it looks a very, very strong card. Yeah,
well, you know, any promoter will tell you get thrown curveballs on fight week. And, you know, when we heard of Martin Gethin pulling out against Anthony Crolla in a big domestic fight, you know, we somehow managed to find Steve Foster Jr., another Manchester lad, to step up. And I think it's a tougher fight for Anthony Crolla. Of course, we have 4 world champions in this country, all of which are with Matchroom and Box on Sky Sports, and 2 of them in action on Saturday night, Carl Froch, of course, and the WBA Super Bantamweight champion Scott Quigg, who's taking on the WBO Latino champion Diego Silva. You know, it's a stacked card. Also, Stephen Smith in a huge fight against Sergio Manuel Medina. Unfortunate news last night coming from Ricky Hatton, who called me to say that Martin Murray was out with a virus. That was disappointing, but we acted very quickly, and one great middleweight been replaced by another. Breaking news here that Andy Lee has been added to the card to replace Martin Murray ahead of his potential huge fight with Matthew Macklin. So a stacked card starting at about 5:30, and a great night for British boxing.
We really look forward to it. Eddie, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We'll be hearing from some of the undercard fighters here on Sky Sports News very, very soon.
Gentlemen, thank you both. The big fight and a top undercard then is live from 6 p.m. Saturday. There'll also be 3 replays, 9 o'clock Sunday morning. It is on Sky Sports box office. Go to channel 731 or skysports.com/Froch Groves for details.